let's look a little bit into this idea. I've listened to some of your work on YouTube, great YouTube channel, by the way. And I like it because other than interviews like this, you also explain things. So we get a chance to have a lecture and you dive into the science. And one of the things you talked about fairly recently at KetoCon was, this idea that we were made to be hunters. And I think that's really important for people to kind of look back a little bit and understand, why choosing meat as a primary source of fuel is a good idea. So share a little bit of the research that you found as it relates to us being hunters as opposed to plant eaters.
Yeah, so there is quite a lot, and it looks that our ancestors sort of split off from other primates about sort of 8 million years ago because they started eating meat, and they started out as scavengers, likely just sort of eating small things or carrion, and then developed into our modern iterations. There's obviously big spectrum between them, but some of the early things. We dealt with the limitations of our anatomy. We're not lions, we're not wolves. We don't have the natural capabilities to tear down and rip apart an animal. So we actually had to figure out other ways. And one of those was tools. So we found carrion animals, and there's in the fossil record going back millions of years before worked stone tools. There's evidence that these animals were using stones to crack open the skulls of animals and get at the brains. And so they started doing that. So they're using stones for quite a long time. And then about 3.3 million years ago, they find sort of the first worked stone tools, and those, being used to cut into meat, tear open animals. And there's a lot of, evidence on the bones of these animals where you can actually see these stone tools sort of dug in, and we can actually show quite clearly. It's not a guess. It's as good as you can get, really. We're working with something that's millions of years old, but it's very, very good evidence. You can see the difference between a tooth or a claw biting into something and a stone tool hacking into a bone. So we have good evidence of that this is how they were being used. As a result, we started getting different changes. Our jaws got smaller, our teeth got smaller because we're eating softer food. We're not chewing on sticks and leaves all day like a gorilla does. And, and then our brains got bigger because we had to use our brains to figure out how to take down something that outclassed us by every physical metric, like a mammoth. And so we figured out tools and tactics. We used fire, we drove them off cliffs, and we used the stone tools to cut them up at the bottom. We also developed a rotational shoulder, and we can throw things very fast. Even just an average adult male can throw at around 60 miles an hour, like throw a baseball around 60 miles an hour, whereas a chimpanzee would only be able to do it about 20 miles an hour, even though they're actually stronger than we are by a lot of respects. So it had that rotational capacity is, for throwing rocks and then eventually spears and other weapons to use in hunting. We also have forward-facing eyes. So this is a very, very typical feature of animals that are hunting. You need to have this 3D vision to try and track these animals down. Whereas prey animals, they generally towards the side of their head, so they get a wider range of vision, so they can see what's sneaking up on them. So you have all these characteristics and changes over time that are in keeping with hunting. Even our vision, people say that color vision, this is to look at different colored fruits and berries because we're going to be eating these things, and that's as may be, but just because we had started off with color vision doesn't mean that just goes away when we start eating meat. In order to lose a trait evolutionarily, it has to provide a survival advantage to lose that trait. So, and in fact, you do see people that are colorblind or even red-green colorblind. We find that, in fact, this actually helps you see at low light, at dusk and dawn, and also can see differences like animals hiding in the leaves. It sort of, you can see them a little clearer. So there's a better contrast if you are colorblind. And I've actually, this is something that's sort of been described, and I've even spoken to people who are hunters and they're red green colorblind. They're like, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I can see I can see animals and deer far easier than my colleagues
Hmm.
when they're out there. So that's another one that provided an advantage as well, and people started sort of losing that color vision as well. It's not uncommon. It's fairly often you'll find someone with this, but having color vision potentially can be useful in other ways, which is why it probably hasn't gone
Hmm.
out completely. So yeah, those are just some of the things that we see that show that we're anatomically and biologically hunters.
Yeah, and it's just good to have perspective. I think if you talk to a vegan, they would try to, reframe that conversation. But I think when people are hearing perspectives, which is why I'm open to all perspectives, you hear the perspective, uh, ask yourself, does this make sense? Maybe do some more research, and then you go from there. So I really appreciate us giving perspective to this conversation.